The shadows pooled in the empty alleyway, cloaking the lone figure as he emerged from the darkness. His steps were measured, his gaze unwavering, a strange sense of purpose etched into every movement. This man had seen things, done things, that no ordinary person could ever fathom. A shiver ran down his spine, a lingering remnant of the chaos that had unfolded mere hours ago. 12 men, all highly skilled assassins, had been sent to eliminate the one and only Mike Tyson. But the legendary boxer, renowned for his unparalleled power and ferocity, had emerged victorious, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. And now, this solitary survivor had been entrusted with a message that would unveil the sinister motives of the man who had orchestrated this ill-fated plot. As he walked, his mind raced, replaying the events that had led him to this moment, when he alone would stand face to face with the most powerful force in the world of professional boxing. The Bookmaker, a ruthless individual who had built his empire on the backs of others, had grown increasingly threatened by Tyson's rise to prominence. His grip on the industry was slipping, and he knew that something had to be done. Desperate to maintain his power, he had assembled a team of the best killers money could buy, sending them on a mission to eliminate the one man who stood in his way. But Tyson was no ordinary opponent. His speed, his strength, his sheer determination, it was all too much for the assassins to handle. One by one, they fell, their bodies crumpling to the ground as the boxer's fists rained down upon them. And in the end, only this lone survivor remained, his clothes stained with the blood of his fallen comrades. As he made his way through the dimly lit streets, the weight of his burden grew heavier with each step. He knew that the message he carried would shatter the carefully constructed facade of the Bookmaker, exposing the true depths of his depravity. The revelations would be earth-shattering, a testament to the power of one man's unwavering spirit in the face of unspeakable danger. The survivor's heart pounded in his chest as he approached the Bookmaker's lair, a sense of trepidation and anticipation mingling within him. He had seen the unthinkable, survived against all odds, and now he would be the one to deliver the final blow, not with his fists, but with the truth. As he entered the dimly lit room, the Bookmaker's eyes widened in disbelief. "You?" he stammered, his voice laced with a mixture of fear and rage. "How did you—" The survivor's lips curled into a grim smile. "I have a message for you," he said, his tone unwavering. "From Mike Tyson." The Bookmaker's face paled, and he sank back into his chair, bracing himself for the words that would forever change the course of his life. The survivor leaned forward, his eyes burning with a fierce determination.
"Tyson sends his regards," he said, "and a warning. Your days of manipulating the system are over. He knows the truth about your operation, the way you've been rigging the odds and exploiting the vulnerable, and he's not going to stand for it any longer." The Bookmaker's hands trembled as he listened, his empire crumbling around him. The survivor's words were a powerful blow, shattering the illusion of control that the Bookmaker had so carefully constructed. "Tyson is a force to be reckoned with," the survivor continued, "and he's not going to let you or anyone else stand in his way. This is your final warning. Step away from the industry or face the consequences of your actions." With those words, the survivor turned and walked away, leaving the Bookmaker to grapple with the reality of his newfound vulnerability. Mike Tyson's unwavering resilience had prevailed, and the Bookmaker's sinister schemes had been exposed for all to see. The survivor's words hung in the air, their weight bearing down on the Bookmaker like a heavy cloak. The man's face was a mask of rage and fear, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. Suddenly, the door burst open, and a group of men in suits flooded the room, their faces grim and their movements precise. The survivor's eyes widened in surprise, but he held his ground, his gaze unwavering. "What is the meaning of this?" the Bookmaker demanded, his voice trembling. One of the men stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Tyson sends his regards," he said, his tone flat and emotionless. Before the Bookmaker could react, the man pulled a gun from his jacket and fired, the gunshot echoing through the room. The Bookmaker's body crumpled to the ground, his eyes wide with shock and betrayal. The survivor stared in horror, his mind racing. This was not the plan. Tyson had promised to expose the Bookmaker's crimes, not have him executed. Something was terribly wrong.
The men in suits turned their attention to the survivor, their guns trained on him. "You're coming with us," one of them said, his voice cold and unyielding. The survivor raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, his heart pounding in his chest. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice shaking. "I was supposed to deliver a message, not—" "The message has been delivered," the man interrupted, his eyes narrowing. "Now it's time for you to come with us." Before the survivor could react, one of the men stepped forward and pressed a cloth over his face. The survivor struggled, his limbs growing heavy as the world began to spin. As darkness closed in, he caught a glimpse of the bookmaker's lifeless body, a pool of blood spreading across the floor. When the survivor opened his eyes, he found himself in a dimly lit room, his hands bound behind his back. He blinked, his vision slowly coming into focus. The men in suits were nowhere to be seen, but the weight of the situation pressed down on him like a heavy burden.
"What the hell is going on?" he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. A sudden movement in the corner of the room caught his attention, and he turned to see a figure emerge from the shadows. His breath caught in his throat as he recognized the man standing before him. It was Mike Tyson, the very person he had been sent to warn. "Tyson?" the survivor said, his voice laced with confusion and fear. "What is this? I thought you wanted to expose the bookmaker's crimes, not have him killed." Tyson's expression was unreadable, his eyes dark and intense. "The bookmaker was a necessary sacrifice," he said, his voice low and calm. "His death was the only way to ensure my rise to the top." The survivor's mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. "But the plan was to bring him down, not—" He trailed off, the realization dawning on him. "You were behind this, weren't you? You were the one who orchestrated the assassination attempt in the first place." Tyson's lips curled into a smile, a gleam of triumph in his eyes. "You're a smart one, aren't you?" he said, his tone laced with a hint of amusement. "Yes, I was the one who set this all in motion. The bookmaker was a thorn in my side, and I couldn't let him stand in the way of my ambitions any longer." The survivor felt his heart sink, the weight of Tyson's betrayal crushing him. "So everything you said about exposing his crimes, that was all a lie?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Tyson shrugged, his expression indifferent. "Sometimes the truth isn't enough, you know," he said. "Sometimes you have to take matters into your own hands, even if it means getting your hands a little dirty." The survivor stared at Tyson, his mind reeling. The man he had believed to be a hero was nothing more than a ruthless manipulator, willing to do whatever it took to achieve his goals. The survivor's world had been turned upside down, and he had no idea what would happen next. As Tyson turned to leave, the survivor called out, "What are you going to do with me?" Tyson paused, glancing over his shoulder. "That, my friend, is entirely up to you," he said, a chilling smile spreading across his face. "The only question is, how far are you willing to go to keep your own secrets?" With that, Tyson disappeared back into the shadows, leaving the survivor alone with his thoughts and the weight of his newfound knowledge. The future was uncertain, and the survivor knew that he would have to make a choice, one that could determine the course of his life, and perhaps the fate of the entire boxing world. Here is a new chapter, approximately 800 words, that continues the events described above and introduces a shocking plot twist. The survivor sat in the dimly lit room, his heart pounding in his chest. Mike Tyson's betrayal had shaken him to his core.
How could the legendary boxer, the man he had believed to be a hero, be the one behind the assassination plot? As the reality of the situation sank in, the survivor felt a growing sense of dread. Tyson had made it clear that his fate was in the survivor's hands, but the survivor had no idea what that meant. What could he possibly do to keep his own secrets safe? Suddenly, the door to the room burst open and a group of men in suits flooded in, their expressions grim. The survivor's eyes widened in fear as they surrounded him, their movements precise and threatening. "What do you want from me?" the survivor asked, his voice trembling. One of the men stepped forward, his eyes narrowed. "We know what you know," he said, his tone cold and unforgiving. "And we can't let that information get out." The survivor's heart sank. They were going to kill him, he realized, to keep Tyson's involvement in the assassination plot a secret. "Please," the survivor pleaded, "I won't say anything, I swear. Just let me go." The man shook his head, a twisted smile forming on his lips. "It's too late for that," he said. "We can't take the risk." The survivor's mind raced, searching for a way out of this impossible situation. But as the men closed in around him, he knew that there was no escape. Suddenly, a loud explosion rocked the building, causing the men to pause and look around in confusion. The survivor's eyes widened as he recognized the sound. It was the sound of a bomb. "What the hell is going on?" one of the men shouted. Before they could react, the door to the room burst open again, and a figure dressed in a black tactical suit and mask emerged, wielding a high-powered assault rifle. The survivor watched in stunned silence as the figure opened fire, taking down the men in suits one by one. The sounds of gunfire and screams filled the air, and the survivor instinctively ducked, trying to avoid the bullets. When the shooting finally stopped, the figure turned to the survivor, its mask obscuring any distinguishing features. "Who are you?" the survivor asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The figure didn't respond, instead reaching down and untying the survivor's hands. The survivor rubbed his wrists, relief washing over him. "Come with me," the figure said, its voice distorted by the mask. The survivor hesitated, unsure of whether to trust this mysterious savior, but with the men in suits lying motionless on the floor, he knew he had no other choice. Cautiously, the survivor followed the figure out of the room and through the dimly lit corridors of the building. As they made their way to the exit, the survivor couldn't help but wonder who this person was and why they had chosen to intervene. Once they were outside, the figure turned to the survivor, its mask still obscuring its face. "You need to get out of here," the figure said. "They'll be looking for you." The survivor nodded, his mind racing. "But what about you?" he asked.
"What's going to happen to you?" The figure shook its head. "Don't worry about me," it said. "Just go, and don't look back." The survivor hesitated, a million questions swirling in his mind. But before he could say anything, the figure turned and disappeared back into the building, leaving the survivor alone in the darkness. As the survivor watched the figure vanish, he couldn't help but feel a sense of relief and fear. He was alive, but at what cost? And who was this mysterious figure who had saved him from certain death? The survivor knew that he couldn't stay here, not with the men in suits surely on the hunt for him. With a deep breath, he turned and started to run, his legs carrying him as fast as they could. As he ran, the survivor's mind raced, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. Tyson's betrayal, the assassination plot, and now this mysterious savior. It was all too much to take in. But one thing was clear. The survivor's life would never be the same. He had been thrust into a dangerous world of secrets and deception, and he knew that he would have to be vigilant if he wanted to survive. The survivor ran on, his heart pounding in his chest, his mind filled with a million unanswered questions. What would happen next? Who else was involved in this twisted game? And most importantly, could he ever trust anyone again? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain. The survivor's life was about to take an unexpected and perilous turn. Here is a new 800-word chapter continuing the story with a shocking plot twist. The survivor ran through the dark streets, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't believe what had just happened. One minute he was facing certain death, and the next, a mysterious figure had swooped in and saved him. As he ran, the adrenaline coursing through his veins, he couldn't help but wonder who that person was and why they had risked their life to help him. Was it someone connected to Tyson, or was it someone else entirely, someone with their own agenda? The more he thought about it, the more confused he became. Tyson, the legendary boxer he had once admired, had betrayed him in the most horrific way. It was almost too much to wrap his head around. Finally, the survivor found a quiet alley where he could catch his breath. He leaned against the wall, his lungs burning, and tried to make sense of everything that had happened. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, and the survivor froze, his heart racing. But then he recognized the face. It was the mysterious savior, their mask removed. "Who are you?" the survivor asked, his voice trembling. The figure stepped forward, and the survivor's eyes widened in shock. It was a woman, her features familiar and yet foreign at the same time. "My name is Amelia," she said, her voice soft and measured, "and I've been watching you, survivor." The survivor's mind raced. Amelia. He had never heard that name before, and yet there was something about her that seemed strangely familiar. "Watching me?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "Why?" Amelia took a deep breath, her eyes locked on his. "Because I know the truth about what's going on," she said, "and I need your help to stop it." The survivor felt a chill run down his spine. The truth? What truth? Amelia's expression darkened, and she took a step closer. "Mike Tyson is not the hero you thought he was," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's part of a much larger conspiracy, one that goes all the way to the top of the boxing world." The survivor's mind reeled. He had suspected as much, but to hear it from someone else, someone who seemed to know more than he did, was almost too much to bear. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice shaking. Amelia reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. "This," she said, "is a recording of a conversation between Tyson and the bookmaker, the man he had killed." The survivor's eyes widened as Amelia pressed play, and a crackly audio recording filled the air. "The plan is in motion," Tyson's voice said. "Once the assassins take care of me, you'll be free to take over the industry." The bookmaker's voice replied, "And what about the survivor? He knows too much." "Don't worry about him," Tyson said, his voice cold and calculating. "I'll take care of him myself." The recording ended, and the survivor felt bile rise in his throat. It was true. Tyson had orchestrated the entire assassination plot, all while positioning himself as the hero. "But why?" the survivor asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why would he do this?" Amelia's expression was grim. "Power, greed, control," she said. "Tyson wants to be the undisputed king of the boxing world, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to get there." The survivor felt his world crumbling around him. Everything he had believed in, everything he had trusted, was a lie. Tyson was no hero. He was a ruthless, manipulative monster. "What do we do?" the survivor asked, his voice trembling. Amelia's eyes narrowed. "We take him down," she said, her voice laced with determination. "But we can't do it alone. We need to find others who know the truth, others who are willing to fight back." The survivor felt a surge of fear and uncertainty. Could they really take on someone as powerful as Tyson? But as he looked into Amelia's eyes, he saw a glimmer of hope, a spark of defiance that he couldn't ignore. "Okay," he said, his voice steadying. "What's the plan?" Amelia's lips curled into a grim smile. "We start by exposing the truth," she said. "We're going to bring Tyson down, once and for all." The survivor nodded, his resolve hardening. He had been through hell and back, but he knew that he couldn't give up now, not when the stakes were this high. As the two of them slipped back into the shadows, the survivor couldn't help but wonder what other secrets were lurking in the dark corners of the boxing world. Whatever lay ahead, he knew that he had to be ready. Ready to face the truth, ready to fight, and ready to take down the man he had once called a hero. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the survivor's life would never be the same. Here is a new 800-word chapter with a shocking plot twist. Okay, so after meeting this Amelia chick and hearing that recording, I was totally shaken. I mean, I always knew Tyson was a beast in the ring, but to find out he's some kind of mastermind criminal, that's messed up. Amelia said we needed to expose the truth and take Tyson down, but I had no idea how we were going to pull that off. The guy's got so much power and influence, it seemed impossible. Still, I was willing to try. I couldn't just sit back and let him get away with all this. So Amelia and I started digging, trying to uncover more dirt on Tyson and his shady associates. We tracked down some old fight footage, spoke to a few people in the industry, and slowly but surely, a disturbing picture started to emerge. Turns out Tyson had been rigging fights for years, using his connections to manipulate the odds and pocket millions. And it wasn't just him. He had a whole network of corrupt officials, bookies, and even other fighters in his pocket. It was a web of deceit and greed that went straight to the top. As we dug deeper, things got even crazier. We discovered that Tyson had been involved in some pretty shady activities outside the ring too. Drug running, money laundering, you name it. The guy was living a double life, using his fame and wealth to cover up a dark and twisted reality. But just when we thought we had it all figured out, something happened that completely blindsided us. We were meeting up to discuss our next move, going over the evidence we'd gathered, when suddenly Amelia's phone started ringing. I could tell from the look on her face that it was bad news. "What is it?" I asked, my heart racing. Amelia's hands were trembling as she spoke. "It's my brother," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He's been killed." I felt the color drain from my face. "What? How?" Amelia shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "They're saying it was a mugging gone wrong, but..." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I think it was Tyson. I think he found out what we were doing and he had my brother killed to send us a message." I couldn't believe it. Tyson had taken it to a whole new level. This wasn't just about money and power anymore. He was willing to kill to keep his secrets hidden. Amelia was devastated, and I could see the anger and determination burning in her eyes. "We have to stop him," she said, her voice shaking. "We have to make him pay for what he's done." I nodded, my own emotions a mix of rage and fear.
"Okay, what's the plan?" I asked, already knowing that this was going to be a hell of a lot more dangerous than we'd anticipated. Amelia's expression hardened. "We are going to expose him once and for all," she said. "We're going to show the world what kind of monster he really is." The next few days were a blur of activity. Amelia and I worked tirelessly, gathering more evidence and reaching out to anyone who might be willing to help us take Tyson down. We knew we were up against a powerful and ruthless opponent, but we were determined to see this through. And then, just when we thought we were ready to make our move, something even more shocking happened. I was at home, trying to catch a few hours of sleep, when my phone started ringing. It was Amelia, and she sounded frantic. "He's dead," she said, her voice shaking. "Tyson's dead." I sat up, my heart pounding. "What? How?" "I don't know," Amelia said. "The news is just breaking. Apparently he was found in his hotel room, shot to death." I couldn't believe it. After all we'd been through, after all the danger we'd faced, Tyson was just gone. And the worst part was, we had nothing to do with it. "Do they know who did it?" I asked, my mind racing. "No, not yet," Amelia replied, "but the police are investigating, and they're calling it a high-profile murder." I leaned back, trying to process everything. Tyson was dead, but that didn't necessarily mean our troubles were over. In fact, it might just be the beginning of something even worse. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Amelia was silent for a moment, and I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. "We keep going," she said, her voice firm. "We find out who killed Tyson and why. There's more to the story, I can feel it." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Okay," I said, "let's do it." As I hung up the phone, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. Tyson was dead, but the nightmare was far from over. There was something else out there, something even more sinister, and we were about to dive headfirst into it. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever was to come. This was no longer just about exposing the truth, it was about survival, and I was determined to make it through, no matter what. Here's the final 800-word chapter to conclude the story. Alright, so, after the bombshell that Tyson had been murdered, Amelia and I knew we had to keep digging. There was no way this whole thing was over, not with all the shit we'd uncovered about Tyson's shady dealings. We started looking into who might have wanted him dead. I mean, the guy had enemies all over the place, corrupt officials, rival fighters, pissed off bookies, the list was endless. But as we dug deeper, a much more sinister possibility started to emerge. Turns out Tyson was connected to some real heavy hitters in the organized crime world. We're talking drug cartels, money laundering rings, the whole 9 yards.
And these weren't the kind of people you could just cross and expect to get away with it. Amelia and I realized that Tyson's murder was probably a hit, ordered by someone way up the food chain. We were dealing with some serious players here, the kind that could make people disappear without a trace. But we weren't about to back down, not after everything we'd been through, and especially not after they'd gone and killed Amelia's brother. We were in this thing to the end, come hell or high water. So we kept digging, sifting through every lead, every shred of evidence we could find. And little by little, the pieces started to fall into place. We uncovered connections between Tyson and a notorious cartel boss, a guy who was practically untouchable. It was a daunting prospect, going up against someone that powerful. But we knew we had to try. We owed it to Amelia's brother, and to everyone else who had been caught up in Tyson's web of deceit and violence. We started reaching out to people, trying to find allies who might be willing to help us take this guy down. It wasn't easy. Everyone was scared shitless of the cartel boss, but we managed to find a few folks who were just as pissed off about Tyson's actions as we were. Together, we put together a plan. It was risky, to say the least, but we didn't have much choice. We had to strike fast before the cartel boss could react and shut us down for good. The day of the big confrontation, my heart was pounding in my chest. I'd never been so scared in my life, but I knew I had to be there for Amelia and for everyone else who had suffered because of Tyson's greed and cruelty. When we finally came face to face with the cartel boss, it was like something out of a movie. He was a big, imposing guy, surrounded by his goons,
and he just glared at us like he was going to crush us with his bare hands. But Amelia, she was fearless. She stepped forward, her voice steady, and laid out everything we knew about Tyson's involvement, about the cartel's operations, about all the lives that had been destroyed. And you could see the guy start to sweat, his confidence wavering. In the end, it came down to a tense standoff. The cartel boss knew he was cornered, that we had the evidence to bring him down, and he had a choice to make. Either he could let us go, or he could try to take us out and risk it all. I held my breath, waiting for his decision. And then, something amazing happened. He raised his hand, signaling his men to stand down. He knew he was beat, that there was no way he could win this one. Amelia and we just stared at each other in disbelief. We'd done it. We'd taken down the big bad boss and exposed the whole rotten system that Tyson had been a part of. As we walked away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was over, finally. No more looking over our shoulders, no more living in fear. We'd won. Of course, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Amelia's brother was still gone, and the pain of that loss would never fully go away. But we knew that we'd honored his memory, that we'd made a difference. And you know what? I think Amelia and I might just keep working together. We make a pretty good team, and there are still a lot of corrupt bastards out there that need taken down. Maybe we'll start our own little crusade, taking on the bad guys one by one. Hey, a guy can dream, right? But for now, I'm just glad to be alive and free. It's been one hell of a ride, that's for sure. But in the end, we came out on top, and that's a pretty damn good feeling. So, that's the story, my friend. The tale of how a couple of underdogs took on the mighty Mike Tyson and his criminal empire and came out victorious. It's a wild ride, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. Sometimes you just gotta take a leap of faith and see where it takes you. Who knows, maybe one day you'll be the one telling this story. But for now, I'm just gonna sit back, relax, and enjoy the fact that we made it through, against all odds. Cheers to that, my friend. Cheers to that.